I went to private school, kindergarten, pre-K kindergarten, first grade. We moved to a district that would accept me in general education, went through the special ed process in end of first grade, beginning of second grade. And by the end of third grade, my teacher, my regular education teacher, had a very strong conversation with my mom and said, your boy's fine. And then once you start with early intervention as a parent, it's very tough to pull it out and pull it away. She did agree that it would be okay if I exited special education at the end of third grade. And so, just like the rest is history, here I stand some 30 years later, with that being a complete distant memory. So I myself am a product of special education and early intervention. My parents are a product of two different approaches. One where the parents' opinions and voices were not heard and expectations were low, and another where expectations were very high. So I went through school, grade school, college, no real concerns, and I'm a well-adjusted, according to who you talk to, adult in society. So,
Sean, was this in North Carolina?
no, this was in New York. I'm from Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
So, not in North Carolina. This was back in the early '80s. So mindsets have changed dramatically since then. That's just my personal story, and I always carry that along with me because I never want to forget, first of all, the anguish that I witnessed my parents going through as a little guy, and what stuck with them even till now. If you call my mom right now and ask her about that, she will lecture and lecture and talk for hours upon hours. So what we do as educators really sticks with students, really sticks with parents, and the decisions that are made by a school system can really, really affect not only a child's current education career, but their whole life trajectory. As teachers, as future teachers, as current teachers like myself, we are always strong advocates for doing what's best for the child, looking at what's right in front of you, but always keeping your eye out, looking down the road towards the future, because you don't ever want to get into a situation where you tell a parent that their child has low expectations and you really have an impact about our students. So that's my personal story. Professionally, I started to work for Cumberland County Schools in 2004 or 5. I was a teacher assistant at Seawain Collier Elementary School in Hope Mills in early and preschool. I worked with special education preschool students, and then I graduated from Fayetteville State. Of course, you were my professor at that, one of my professors at that time. I went to become a special education preschool teacher at J.W. Coon Elementary School. I did not take early childhood education in my undergrad studies. Up, and I had an opportunity to continue on with what I loved. I loved and always will love preschool. I got a job on a Tuesday. I graduated that following Saturday from undergrad, and by next Monday, I was already figuring out where I was going to go to get my add-on certificate for early childhood. So I worked at J.W. Coon for 3 years, and then I moved to the central office of Cumberland County Schools as a case manager from July of 2012. We're still looking to fill that position, so I'm kind of doing 2 roles. It's an exciting adventure. It's very, very tiring, but it's extremely rewarding for myself. Be here today, and I hope you gain something from this. So let's get into the actual what we're going to talk about today: who we are, what we do, and how we relate to that teaching standard. So, who we are. I'll start at the bottom of history. You mentioned I was going to start with that, end with that, but since somebody came in and already said, hey, Jill was that night that we were discussing earlier. She founded she was given the opportunity to do preschool special education at the Cumberland County Schools in the late 1980s. And she literally worked out of the back of her car, driving all over town, working with kids, doing IEP meetings, coordinating services, et cetera, et cetera. And we went from one person with a dirty trunk in her car to now we have our office staff has 3 case managers currently, and then we're looking for 4, so they're shifted out. We've got myself as an instructional specialist. We have a guidance counselor who works on some other transitions. We have 3 itinerant teachers, 3 itinerant speech language pathologists, a diagnostic speech pathologist, she does all the testing. We have 3 psychologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, 19 classrooms and 17 sites in elementary schools, preschool classrooms, self-contained, and a developmental day center at the UCP Dorothy Spainhour Center on the campus of Fayetteville Tech. We basically have a 2-phase process in our department. Number 1 is the coordinating with the families and facilitating the special education process, and that's what we do in the office. And then we have the instructional component where children who have already been identified receive their services and work their way through the program. Does everybody have one of these? Because I did take one. Everybody has one of these. So let's talk about specifics of what we do. So we provide the child find screening process. One person I forgot to mention is we have 2 clerks, and these clerks do everything in our office. They do things that I can't do, which is answer multiple telephones at the same time. I have a complete lack of ability to do that myself, which is very good because we have folks that do that really well. We have an open process. If you have a child who is between the age of 3 and kindergarten, you just pick up the phone and give us a call and say, hey, I've got some concerns. My kid can't talk. I don't know if my kid's behavior is correct or not. My kid went to a diagnostician and has a diagnosis of autism. Hey, my kid has cerebral palsy. What do I need to do next? And what our office staff does, what our clerks do, is they provide the parents with paperwork, a permission to screen form. We collect a questionnaire on the family, a social developmental history, and then when we get that screening form back, we schedule a developmental screening. Now, child find is required through federal law, and we are required to act within 30 days of a notification, which means if a parent calls us today, we have until February the 24th to act. And what does acting look like? It means we get that paperwork collected and we get them onto our screening calendar. So we do screenings. We do 2 kids a day on Tuesdays and 2 kids a day on Wednesdays. And they come at 1 and 1:30 p.m. at Ann Chestnut Middle School on Skybow Road. And we have a little testing center set up in the back of the building with 3 classrooms. One of them is set up as a meeting room. One is a formal testing center station, and the 3rd room is a room full of toys and nice preschool stuff. So, carpet. We've got a little kitchen center in there, vacuum cleaners, car racing, all kinds of good stuff in there for the kids to play with. So these 2 kids come for our screening, and we do their hearing test and their vision test, and we observe them in play, and we run them through a little developmental screening, and that's on Tuesday Tuesday and Wednesday, so we're doing 4 kids a week. At the end of that screening, it usually takes about 20-25 minutes. We say, do they need to be referred or not? Do we notice any developmental concerns? If the answer is no, we say your kid is good to go. We're not seeing much. If the parent's agreeable, we send them on their way. We give them an information packet. We provide them with phone numbers to like the Partnership for Children, Head Start, the Title I preschool program, which is regulated in our school system. If parents need assistance finding a private therapy agency, we've got a booklet filled with like every phone number that you can think of under the sun. And that's if a parent is agreeable about not moving forward with the referral. And at that point, we close the case. Yes, ma'am?
Would you allow, like, those of us who are student teachers or going to be student teachers to come in and moonlight like over the summer to see how you guys do things, the office and how it works?
I don't want to say yes today. I don't want to say no today. I'd have to get that confirmed, and we have to work that out between the EC leadership team and the school here. I'd like to say yes, but I can't right now.
Okay.
That would be awesome though, because the more folks that see what we do, not only are you getting great hands-on training, but you're also spreading the word out in the community. So.
Sean,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a product too. My daughter is in the early intervention system, but when I went for a second degree, did my master's in special education, I got to do a whole training right with Jill. I do Jill anyway, right with Jill and everybody through there, and it was very helpful for me. And I got to observe in the pre-K classrooms, all kinds of good stuff.
Well, because, and I know not all of us are elementary or preschool ed or early childhood, but I'm secondary. But I know for a fact if I see how I'm like her, I'm also a product of that system, but I'm a product of that system back in the 90s when it wasn't as robust as it is now. And I'm thinking if we see how it works as those of us who are secondary education, we can definitely see how those early interventions can also be applied in the high school environment.
Absolutely, and I'll look into that and reach out.
To the college here. We would love to have as many folks as that want to come and observe and help out and learn some strategies. That would be awesome. And Child Find, it runs all the way through high school too. It looks different in high school, but the same principle applies. If we have a kid who has some sort of concern, the school system takes action in providing interventions and then deciding if it needs to go through special education process. So again, we don't have 12th graders playing with a little kitchen set. It looks different in high school, but it's the exact same concept. Kids who we do have concerns for, or a kid who we don't see concerns for, but the parent says, hey, I want my kid referred anyways. We just say, okay, we bring the case file back to our office and get the referral meeting scheduled, and at that point, we start the special education process. And what that looks like is the moment that we say that there's a concern, or the parent insists that there needs to be a referral, that starts a 90-day process that requires us to meet to conduct a special education referral meeting, test the child, if the child needs to be tested and the parents are agreeable to that, meet to determine special education eligibility, and when we look to meet to determine special education eligibility, we have to use the policy manual that clearly specifies what the criteria is for special education disabilities. There's 14 disabling conditions in the state of North Carolina, and under each one is a very strict criteria. And you have to have a disability. The disability has to adversely impact your child's educational performance, and there has to be a need for specially designed instruction. It's what's called the 3 prongs of special education, and that's age 3 through 22. So we have 90 days to complete that process, and once that process is complete, the child ends up not being eligible for special education. We do something very similar to what we do at the screening process if we don't have any concerns. We say, you're good to go, here's some information, some community outreach, and if you have any concerns in the future, by all means, give us a call. If we do find the child eligible for services, at that point, we talk about what the service delivery would actually look like, and I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. We also provide Part C to B transition services. Part of the federal IDEA law, Part B is 3 to 22, that's public school. Part C is infant toddler, that's birth until age 3. And that's a completely separate entity from public school, but they provide early intervention services, service coordination for children who either have, infant toddlers who either have developmental delays or like an established medical condition. These are children like myself who were born with some medical concerns, or if a child is diagnosed with autism very early on. They work with them, and what we do is part of their obligation is to contact us somewhere about 2.5 years of age to start what's called the transition process. And we don't put those children through a screening, but we do start the special ed process about 2 years, 6 to 7 months, so that you have a 90-day window to get them complete and either eligible or not eligible by about 2 years, 11 months, to give us a few week window, so that if they are eligible, they can receive services and start school on their 3rd birthday. So we have children, they are tiny little kids that start school on their 3rd birthday. In fact, one of my years in teaching, I had a child start, it was his 3rd birthday. It was a Friday, and we were going on a field trip to the circus, and the only thing I could tell this boy is it is all downhill from here. Because when is he gonna go to school start school on a Friday and go to the circus as your first day of school? Hey, this is fun. So, yeah, we work these infant toddler children through, and on our current, we run about 500 kids through the program a year through eligibility, screenings and whatnot. About roughly half come from screening and roughly half come from infant toddler. We also provide kindergarten transition services. As kids get close to kindergarten, and for this year, our start date for transitions is April 1st. So from April 1st of the kindergarten, of the year, spring before kindergarten, what we do is coordinate IEP meetings. We coordinate with school age special education program specialists, and we make recommendations. Of course, our recommendations are informal recommendations to guide the IEP team. Once they hold the actual IEP meeting, most of the time the recommendations are put in place. And this is for like the preschool kid that might need to go to a self-contained kindergarten setting, or the kid from Head Start that's getting like once a month services, might need a little touch of math support in kindergarten. Those are the transition meetings that I'm discussing. So that when a child starts kindergarten and they leave our program, they have a current IEP with current goals and current services to reflect what kindergarten looks like, not what preschool looks like. And roughly 180 of our students will be transitioning to kindergarten in this fall, so we have to hold approximately 180 IEP meetings between April 1st and June 8th, when the teachers are done with school. It's a pretty big ordeal. It takes a lot, all hands on deck. It's a whole lot of work with IEP meetings and coordinating services and getting parents on board with everything. But we always get it done, and it always is great for the individual child, because what we do in each single IEP meeting is we don't worry about the noise outside. We don't worry about the other kids. We don't worry about how this kid might interfere education or the other kids. All we worry about is that one single child, so that we can make that appropriate choice. And if I'm in that meeting, and I can't tell you, I don't have anything to prove this except my word. Every single IEP meeting that I go into, and I transition a kid into the program or out of the program, I always think of my mother and how that stuck with her, what she went through. And that's my goal, is to make the transition as successful as possible. So we do that for our kids. We also provide transfer student transition services. Another way a kid can get into our program is if they cold call us and say, hey, we just moved here from Texas. My kid has an IEP. We say, very similar to what we do here with our clerks, making contact with the family. If you come and bring us that IEP, we'll get services coordinated. So if a kid comes in from out of state with an IEP, we look at providing comparable special education services. It's not necessarily minute to minute. Special education is, what it looks like is defined at the state level, not the federal level. Federal gives the overall umbrella, state hones in on the very specific regulations. So Texas with a developmental delay probably has a developmental delay in North Carolina, but we still got to test, we still have to provide, so we provide services in the interim, and we call it comparable services. Not minute to minute, not exactly the same as what they were getting out of state, but usually if a parent brings in an IEP, we can have that case processed and sent off either to a school or to an itinerant team. An itinerant team, those are the folks that go out into the community and work with kids. Usually within a day or two. So it's very quick. And we have, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 kids come in from out of state, or kids that move from within the state or Cumberland County. And then overall, the facilitation of the special education process from the beginning to the end. And that is where the case management team, myself, all hands on deck, talking with the family, talking with the parents, communicating back and forth through phone, face-to-face, email, texting, however you can reach out to that family. The more contact we have with the family, the more positive relations we build with the family during the meeting process, the more comfortable they feel about sending their little baby off to school, the more comfortable they feel about putting their kid on a school bus, sending their child, who yesterday I met with a child who had a tracheostomy in her neck, a breathing tube, she had a G-tube, and she had a cleft palate and a chin, that a lower jaw, half of it was removed. And if, without knowing the program, if you're the parent of that child, how likely are you to send that kid to school? Probably not. Probably not at all. Through that communication, even yesterday, when we finally met, and a couple weeks prior, we forged that bond. By the time we were done with that meeting yesterday morning, that mom was talking about, okay, when can I get my kid into school? When can I do? I said, Mom, you gotta hold back. We gotta test her first. We don't even know if she's eligible yet. So, just that positive communication with the families is what makes all the difference in the world. We are not a cold department that just shuffles paperwork around. We work with human beings. We work with students. We work with families. And our services have to be what's best for the child, but also in a manner that is reasonable to the family and in a manner that the family will accept the services. Because the last thing we want is to find out that a child is eligible and offer the family a plan that they don't agree to, and then the child doesn't get services. That's not doing anybody any good. And then overall, the high quality, specially designed instruction for preschoolers throughout the whole county is what we provide. And that's that out of the office into the classroom phase of our instruction. Are you all familiar with the Foundations of Early Learning, North Carolina Foundations? and if you're, I mean, you already identified yourself as a high school person. So I put some links at the end, and I actually linked them and into the slide. I didn't put the actual hyperlink in, so you won't be able to see what the link is, but hopefully we can get the slideshow emailed out to folks so that when you click on those links, you can open up the North Carolina Early Learning Network, which is a gigantic website that puts together all the state initiatives. The North Carolina Foundations for Early Learning is basically our instructional manual for preschool. And we teach through play, we teach through positive social emotional development, we teach through language development. We don't do arithmetic and writing homework in preschool. We don't sit down and do like whole group instruction and you read a story and you go break up into your groups and you do worksheets and you talk about your answers. That's elementary, middle, high school. We play in preschool. If you go into a preschool class and it does not look like fun, or it does not look like play, or even a touch of chaos, which is perfectly fine, as long as it's controlled and safe. If it does not look like that, I'm telling you, it's wrong. It is 100% wrong. If you go into a preschool class and they are building blocks over here and screaming over here, getting dressed in the dress-up center and cooking in the kitchen, and a couple kids are sitting at the table doing a little Play-Doh or finger painting activity, that's what you want to see. That is a good preschool class. If you go into a class and it looks dry and dreary and like a college class, not that you're dry and dreary, it is dreary outside today, but that's a different story. If you go into a class and it looks like an elementary, middle, or high school class, it is wrong. I don't care what any school administrator tells you. I don't care what anybody at the district level tells you. If you go into a class and it does not look fun, they're doing it wrong. We instruct through play, we instruct through fun, we do singing, dancing, the whole 9 yards. I'm a terrible dancer, but I will throw down in a classroom in a heartbeat. That's how we get our learning in, and through special education, again, we're working on the IEP goals. So we're collecting data and actual observable data. How many times did it take you to tell that, how many times did you have to tell that kid to put that block away? How many times did you have to show with visual supports how to build a tower into an A-B pattern? That's the sort of data that we're looking at. It took Johnny one verbal prompt to not get in Susie's face, to give her space. It took Johnny 2 verbal prompts and a modeling and 3 gestures to build the block tower. That's the sort of objective data that we're looking at for specially designed instruction. But all of that is done in the context of that play facilitation. So that's essentially what we do. And how do we relate to this standard here? Teachers work collaboratively with the families and significant adults in their lives of their students. I think I've already shared why, how we meet this standard. Anybody want to chime in? Yes, ma'am? Yeah?
Isn't that when you do like the IEP meetings?
Yeah, absolutely.
Collaborating with them to figure out what's gonna be best for the student?
Absolutely, and all that pre-meeting collaboration, everything we do relates to this standard. And compulsory attendance and voluntary services. Anybody know what compulsory attendance age is in the state of North Carolina? I'll give you a hint, it's between 6 and 8. That's a right number.
It's illegal to have your kid not in school by 7, is it?
That is correct. Or you have to be registered as a licensed homeschool parent, which you can do through the Department of Non-Public Education through North Carolina. It's a website, you have to fill out an application. We don't require our kids to go to school. Parents aren't required to talk to us. They come to come to us because they don't know who to turn to. Their family is telling them that something's wrong with their kid. Their cousins are talking in full sentences, and their child is nonverbal and chewing on stuff like an infant or toddler, and they're 4. They come to us because they're desperate. They need help, and then we are there. We are there for them. We are there to be their safety net, their support, and we may be the only person in their life, in their child's life, to that point, that listens to what their concerns are and takes them seriously. Everything we do in our department, we do hand in hand with the parents. That's how we relate to this standard. And don't ever forget that if you go into early childhood as your career. Everything we do with the families. And if you say one thing wrong, and it's just like any interaction with any human being that you have, if you say one thing wrong, that might turn them off to you and the whole program, and that affects the child, and it affects society in whole. One thing I was asked to speak about was some of the statistics and research on early childhood education. We have worked really hard over the last 5 years in our department to shift what we do. And although we work hand in hand with the family, what we did previously, was really hound the parent, get them to fill out the paperwork before we do anything. At this point in our office, we switched our thinking to work with the family, but get them through our office as efficiently and quickly as possible, because we're doing no good to the kid in our office. The good happens once they hit services, get to a classroom. So we've really shifted the number and increased the number of students that we had. In December 2014, we had on our head count that we certified to the state and federal government, we had 80, don't quote me, don't write this down, please, 80 some odd kids. I think it was 86, but again, it might have been 89, I can't remember off the top of my head. This year we certified 338. We've blown up. And then that's just in December. And then once we get to April, we'll be hovering over 500 kids in our program. Now, when we walked with those families beforehand, back in the Jill days, we did really well with those families. We still do really well with those families. We haven't cut back any of that communication positivity that we're sharing with our families. We just cut back on the paperwork. We get them screened quicker, we get them tested quicker, and we get them in quicker. So that means there's just more kids to work with, which it has a positive effect on overall society. When you do, there's beyond countless amounts of research available for you all to look up. I don't want to give away any term projects or anything. If you look up any sort of statistic on adults, reading level, literacy rates, adult obesity, diabetes, health concerns, you look up jail statistics and you correlate that to early intervention versus non-early intervention special education, that early intervention is going to have a much better success rate than kids and eventually who become adults who do not receive early intervention. There's only one reason why I'm standing here today, and it's because I was in a whole bunch of therapies as an infant. And that stimulated my bones, my muscles, and my brain to compensate for the damage that was done when I was born. That happens at birth. That happens 0 to 5. There's a phrase like the first 2,000 days are the most critical in a child's life. And if we can attack a child's concern early on, the outcomes are exponentially better than if we ignore or if families aren't aware of services that are available. That's why what we do is so vitally important. We're such a very niche department. Nobody outside of early childhood thinks of early intervention special education. But if you have a child that goes to kindergarten with absolutely nothing, and that child has autism, that kindergarten team is gonna be wishing and praying that they could reverse time and go back to get them into early intervention.
Sean, I was going to ask that
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
What overall percentage of the kids that you screen are autistic, would you say? Is it the vast majority?
I don't have a statistic, I don't have a hard number. I can say that we've seen a lot more children identified with autism now than we have in the past. And children with young kids, we can always look, there's a category called developmental delay, which is a general catch-all category for students who have delayed areas of development. Autism is a very specific category of special education for children who have social, emotional concerns and social communication concerns, and also behavioral patterns and functional behavioral patterns that limit a child's ability to participate in school. What looked like intellectual disability or just a delayed kid or developmental disability, that dirty R word that people used to use, what adults who went through the program in 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s, who now are walking around intellectually handicapped, might in fact actually have autism. There's not been a significant increase in the number of folks with autism. What's happened is we're more in tune with diagnosing autism. So if we get a diagnosis in at an early age, it helps. So we are doing a lot more autism testing now than we used to do as a department. Even in the last 5 years, it's really increased.
Parents are
So aware now. You can go onto Google and diagnose anything you want and get a whole bunch of stuff that is somewhat true and sometimes not true at all. In fact, that huge study that came out a long time ago about how autism was caused by immunizations, and that was a concrete fact up until somebody else did some research and said that that was a bunch of you-know-what. And now that's a no-go anymore. And folks will get onto Facebook, social media, talk with mom groups, and get all sorts of information. And kids who didn't talk, 2-year-olds that didn't talk a few years ago, and their parents said, I'll grow out of it, it's fine. They're now coming to us, and we're actually saying, oh, this kid actually has autism. Or this kid has intellectual, cognitive impairments that we could address and remediate before the child goes to kindergarten or even 3rd grade is really the magic cutoff, because that's 3rd grade starts your standardized testing for beginning of the year testing, end of year testing, and all that good stuff. So if you look on and do some scholarly research, peer-reviewed research, you can search for early childhood interventions and relate it to pretty much anything you want in life. Socioeconomic, median income, the health and the literacy, jail, violent crimes, anything. You can relate it back to what early childhood is doing in our, yes ma'am?
You said you had to be back by 10:30.
Yeah, I do have to be back by 10:30. So I'm gonna wrap this up now. I went through a whole slew of stuff. And I talked about what we did, who we are, how we relate to this standard here, and I talked a little bit about the research. Does anybody have any questions for me? I didn't think it would take as long to get here as it, I'm good for another couple minutes. So, yes, ma'am?
I went to get a certification in early childhood, birth through K. And as a result of that, I had to do, 2 classes in special ed. And one of the things I found out, that, parents who are in denial, how do you help those parents who are in denial when when a child has been referred?
Well, we reach into our bag of tricks as teachers, and we pull out something very important in our arsenal of strategies, and that's kids' gloves. We pull out our kids' gloves and anybody know what a grandma paddle is?
Oh, yeah.
Anybody know what a real paddle is?
Yes.
Like a wooden spoon. A grandma paddle is a wooden stick with a little fluffy heart-shaped pillow on the back. We pull that out too. And it takes skill, it takes practice as case managers and special education folks, but we do a little bit of dancing with the family, and we get them to buy in. And ultimately, we tell them that it's voluntary, they don't have to accept services, they don't have to accept testing. And it seems like the moment that you give parents, those folks that are in significant denial, the moment you give them a choice to back out, 99 out of 100 times they're gonna walk with you. Because you've given them that option and that choice, and you haven't put the pressure on them. And it's just the psychological tricks, and we don't coerce parents into signing anything. We always tell them, you don't have to sign any paperwork. You don't have to agree. Even if we come up with a plan, you don't have to send your kid to school. We just want to talk about your kid and how we can help. We're completely voluntary.
Do you
no
think,
pressure.
do you think perhaps it's because the parents are reluctant, and I'm sure it would be, having a label placed in their child as being special ed?
A lot of folks don't like the label, and we present it up front, and we say, we're looking to provide help if your child needs help, but to provide that help, we have to determine if your child is a student with a disability. And that D word that's a naughty word to say, but you have to say it as a parent. Do we have parents in the room here?
Oh, yeah.
So if anybody said that your child might have a disability, you might have a coming to Jesus moment with the person that said that. I'm a parent myself, and my own child had an IEP for speech therapy, and it was tough to hear, but it's a necessary component. And if you can walk with that family, be very upfront with them, they walk with us. Yes, ma'am?
Have you noticed the stigma surrounding children with disabilities change over time?
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's not as much of a handicap as it used to be. It's not baggage, it's just your child is a little bit different than other kids, but everybody's different anyway, so let's get your kids some help. We have seen a major shift, speaking about that autism. Folks 5-10 years ago were very against being labeled as a child with autistic or autism. They always wanted, even if the child has significant concerns, they always wanted developmental delay. Now folks are more wanting autism and shying away from developmental delay. Because if you call a spade at 3, you don't have to deal with that at 8. If you call them developmental delay, and that category is only good until you're 8 years old. So you have to retest and come back, and it's a grieving process every time you meet and every time there's testing. And folks are now more in line with just, my kid's got autism, so what? Let's talk about how we can help them. Yes, sir?
Has it changed a lot with like autism and stuff of children switching back to regular education after the 3rd grade year?
Well, we look towards putting them in regular ed right from the get-go. We shifted a few, prior to a few years ago, we traditionally just put kids in special education classrooms, or unless they were old enough to go to the Title I or regular preschool program, unless they were in Head Start, those kids that weren't already in daycare. We really shifted our data from our least restrictive environment data that you can actually access by that website right there, the Early Learning Report. And again, I hope that we'll get this emailed out, so that you can click on that link. It'll show you our data, and it shows that we had too many kids in special education compared to state averages, and not enough kids in their natural environment. Now, what's the natural environment for a preschool kid is wherever they are to receive their general education. So preschool is not mandatory, so where would you, if you're not in school, where are you gonna be? Home, or out in the community somewhere. McDonald's Playland or Chick-fil-A Playland, the park. So we're doing now, looking more towards natural environment services. So a lot of those younger kids that we put into special education at 3 is a holding pattern until they can go to regular at 4. Those kids are now not being placed in special ed classrooms, and we're instructing them either in their house or out in community play groups that we've set up throughout town. And, you know, we don't want to put a kid, that kindergarten transition is a huge deal. And if we can get a kid from a special ed class, pre-K, into regular ed in kindergarten with some supports in place and through special education and general education accommodations and modifications, we're gonna make that happen and give that kid a chance. So we're seeing a decrease in the number of kids that we're putting in special ed kindergarten classrooms as well. Really give that kid a chance, and because you can always meet, if it doesn't work out and they're in regular ed, you can always meet up at the first grading period, because you're gonna have grades, you're gonna have discipline reports if there are any, and you're gonna have data to show that it's not working. We talk about a more restrictive arrangement. If you're in a special ed class off the get-go and you might need to get out, the data might not always be as supportive because you're in that class all the time, and then it's gonna come up to somebody with a very strong will at the IEP meeting to say, let's give this kid a chance out of the regular ed class, out of the special ed class, and it's kindergartners. So it's a delicate dance, and we're not always right, but we try to be right as much as possible.
I'm glad to hear that the shift has changed a little bit. For those who don't know, I've got the diagnosis of Down syndrome, and I had to really actually fight.
Do you mind sharing your name?
Vicki Irvin. You mentioned my name to Julia or anybody, Mary Black, they all know me.
I bet they do.
Yes, I do. But at the time that my daughter went to early intervention, which to me, I'll tell you what, I always would tell Jill last night, if the rest of the school system ran like early intervention ran, it would be wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Because I had the absolute best experience with Jill last night with early intervention.
Preach, because we still do the same thing. You can stand on a
But I will
mountain.
tell you this too, that at that time, they were not as, they did not want to put my child in regular education. My child went successfully into general education, kindergarten, first grade, second grade,
I'm glad to hear
with
that.
support. And I had to literally go to school shopping, up and down around my house, till I found Felix Keys, I don't know if you know him, at William H. Owen Elementary School. He said, Mrs. Urban, I can help you. Bring your daughter here.
Our goal
And
is.
so I'm glad to see the shift.
And that's a wonderful success story for you, but you had to do all the work. And if it wasn't for
I'm so happy when you said the shift.
if it wasn't for a very strong parental advocate, where would your kid be right now in a special ed class, right?
Well, that's where.
And we want to.
That's what happened with us. I was a 504 that turned into an IEP, and my mom had to get to the point where she was gonna sue the school district because my 504 wasn't followed.
We do not want that to happen to any of our families. We, like I said a few moments ago, we may be right most of the time, but we're wrong sometimes. But we don't want to be wrong in the aspect that we didn't give the parent what they wanted for their child. Yes, you know your child best. Yes, we know your child's education best. But if you're not on the same page, you've got to get to that same page. And if they're your child, I'm gonna let you take the lead as parents on that. And that's my personal philosophy, and that's the philosophy that I'd like to impart on everybody. Don't ever, ever, ever get into an IEP meeting and flat out say no to the person. Always listen, you're gonna be in big trouble. Now, if you go that route, and there's also data, and you've had multiple meetings and multiple attempts, at some point, there will be a disagreement in how things are aligned, possibly. The hope is that there never will be, though, and I want all of our children, however many we end up with at the end of this school year, 600 or whatever, to be as well taken care of as my own child, and to have the opposite experience of what my mother went through. And when I got this job in October, she went and found the lady she literally went in Buffalo, New York, and found the lady that told me then that I wouldn't amount to anything. She was like 90 years old. And I found her and said, hey, remember me? You told my son that he wouldn't amount to anything. If you worked in my son's school district, he'd be your direct supervisor right now. She gave him my card and said, you call him if you need anything and won't hear anything. I said, Mom, that's so embarrassing. Why did you do that to me? But c'est la vie. It is what it is. You've asked plenty of questions now. I do have an IEP meeting that starts in 4 minutes at the ERC on Elementary Drive. If you need anything at all, the PowerPoint that you have printed out now, it doesn't have direct links to those 4 websites that I put in there. It also doesn't have my email address.
I will
She'll
send,
email it out.
I will email.
There's the main number. You can talk to our intake clerk, and if you want to joke around with her and say, hey, I got this kid, you can do that, and she'll start feverishly taking notes. And you can say, just kidding, I want to talk to Sean. I wouldn't do that. You call that number if you want to talk to me. She can transfer you over. There's my direct extension to my desk. I have Twitter. I don't use it much, but you can follow me if you want to. I do some educational stuff. My email address is there. That's the best way to reach me. Email. If you have any questions or concerns about anything we do, any special education at all, or anything in general at all, ask. I'm just another person in the community. I've been through, I don't even want to say how many colleges. I did very well at Fayetteville State, but before that I went through a growth period in my early 20s, and college was a struggle for me in the beginning, not because I wasn't capable, just because it wasn't a priority in my life. My parents were paying for it. When they stopped paying for it, I magically started to get 4.0s. If you have any concerns about college or anything in general or specific to what we do, reach out to me.